Tonight, we will go deep into the realm of the unknown and question everything as we search for the truth. We will explore the possibility of countless phenomena within the ultra spectrum, and together we will learn that it is all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association, and it is a live stream broadcast. If you have a question, send me a super chat or become a YouTube member. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association. Take a seat, relax, get ready, and welcome to Beyond the TinFoil Hat.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Beyond the TinFoil Hat. Today is Thursday, August 25th, 2022, and I, Ryan Stacey, am your host this evening. I'm a licensed private investigator and a citizen journalist and the Director of Investigations for the Experiencer Support Association. I'm also the former National Chief Investigator for MUFON Canada and the former International Field Investigator Trainer for MUFON in general. Welcome to the channel, and thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight's theme is paranormal research and an author. Our guest for Season 4, Episode 28 is Alex Matsuo. Matsuo? Am I saying that right? Okay. Alex Matsuo is a paranormal researcher, social media influencer, and author. She's the founder of the Association of Paranormal Study and runs The Spooky Stuff. If it's weird, spooky, unusual, scary, macabre, I don't know how to say that word. I never know how to say that word. Or haunted, she wants to write and talk about it. Alex was recently seen on the third season of Haunted Hospitals in episode 12 titled It Followed Me Home. The episode can be seen on Discovery Plus. She has also been seen on Travel Channel's Most Terrifying Places in America. In addition, she is the host of the podcast called The Spooky Stuff. Alex has written several books about the paranormal, including One Bed Over, A Hospital Haunting, The Brave Mortal's Guide to Ghost Hunting, The Haunting of the 10th Avenue Theater, More Than Ghosts, A Guide to Working Residential Cases in the Paranormal Field, and The Haunted Actor. Her upcoming book, The Hamptonville Hauntings, will be released September 2022, which is right around the corner. Alex holds an MA in theater for San Diego State University and currently resides in Arlington, Virginia. She's been featured on KPBS, San Diego, Fox News, and the Washington Post for her various endeavors. Finally, Alex is a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution through her ancestor, Joseph Toler. You can find her social media on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter, all at The Spooky Stuff. And it's also on her website in the banner below, which is alexmatsuo.com. All right, so Alex, put on your tinfoil hat. We're about to go down a rabbit hole. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How are you, Ryan?
Good. Did I pronounce your name right? I forgot to ask you. I'm sorry.
You did, yeah.
All
Matsuo. Right. Yep, you got it.
Thanks, EC. All right. So as always, we're going to start with our icebreakers. I'm going to just play a little jingle here, and then I'll ask this question for the first time. All right. So this icebreaker question is brought to us by CC, who runs EA for us, Experiencers Anonymous, which is this weekend, I believe, Saturday. No, next weekend. Coming up someday. It's on the 31st, right? Yeah, it's coming up. Anyways, so this question is, what is your perspective on ethereal entities attaching to objects? As an example, haunted dolls.
Well, that's a good one. Well, considering that I own a haunted doll, more as an experiment than anything. So I have mixed feelings about it. Now, whether I think there's something like a person attached to my haunted doll, I'm not sure. Now, if it's more of like an energy imprint, which is kind of more what I'm leaning towards these days, and yes, absolutely. Especially if there's an object that somebody loved in particular, like a doll, so or not even just loved, but spent a lot of time with. I feel like their energy can imprint on there, and we can pick up traces of their personality and who they were. Actually, yeah, she's actually hanging out right behind me on the bottom shelf. So yeah, so I have mixed feelings about it because on one hand, I would be a little depressed to think about my soul being attached to an inanimate object for the rest of my afterlife. Now, could a piece of me get attached to it? I guess, sure. Yeah, but yeah, so I've been experimenting with a haunted doll for a little over a year now, and it's been interesting. It's been interesting. Really molded my uh it's really molded, or I guess maybe even debunked some of my previous assumptions that I had about haunted dolls. Yeah, it's been an adventure. I'll put it that way.
I have not had any experience with any haunted dolls, but the idea terrifies me. I'm not a fan of clowns, so if there's any like haunted doll clowns, I'm not going to be anywhere near that.
Yeah,
That'd be
I don't
like
blame you.
terrifying. Um, how does like how would a doll become haunted in the first place? So, like, how does that start? Like, I know you mentioned, like, is it the residual energy? Is it always like that, or does it have to belong to the person who owned it, or could it be attached by another entity? Like Chucky, for an example.
Mm.
That's a haunted doll, a very haunted doll.
I would almost say Chucky is possessed though,
Yeah,
which would be
okay,
a different realm
yeah,
in the spooky stuff. Yeah, so because I decided I wanted to buy a haunted doll just to see because that's what all the influencers were doing. That's all the kids were doing lately, and I was like, let's just give this a try. So I scoured eBay and Etsy, and I'll be honest, I did want to make sure that whatever was attached to the doll was friendly, just because as much as I attract chaos in my life, if I could avoid it on purpose, that'd be great. Especially since I have I have cats, I have a fiance. I have a lot at stake, so I didn't want to invite anything that could potentially cause harm. So I leaned in on the story with my haunted doll is she's haunted by an old woman who used to be a baker during her lifetime. And I'm like, okay, grandma, basically. I'm grandma who liked to bake pies. Okay, I'll
yeah. If
take
it's going
her.
to be haunted, that seems safe. Yeah,
Yeah, that seems like the most viable option. So I bought her, and yeah, and I started doing communication sessions with her using different things like a spirit box, an app on the computer called Phasma Box, Echo Vox, EVP sessions, just turning on a recorder and just letting it run and talking to Madison and see what comes through. And of course, this is all ghost theory. I'm not going to be able, well, I haven't tried. Could put Madison under controlled conditions in a lab and see what happens. If any scientists out there want to collab, I'm open to that. But it seems like it's Madison. Madison was named after the old woman, that elderly woman that supposedly haunts her. I find that old lady Madison is a very small part of the experience with that doll, and I've picked up. It seems like there are at least 2 or 3 other personalities that are attached to her. So I'm like, well, what did I buy here? Now they're all friendly. They're all very friendly. But it is a little chaotic when I try to do communication sessions because they all kind of come through, which is weird. Like it's always the same, 3 very dominant voices and a 4th very quiet voice that occasionally comes in, who I think is actually Madison. Yeah, it's been interesting, and I set boundaries when she arrived, but so far so good. I mean, nothing's flying off the walls, and
Hmm.
everyone's healthy and happy, and yeah,
So
it's interesting.
you just have the one doll, the one haunted
Yeah,
doll.
so okay. So I have
So
a haunted doll.
who are the other 3? So I'm just counting.
Yeah, that's what
Well,
I'm wondering.
okay.
I think one of them is French because sometimes French comes through, and that's regardless of whether it's the spirit box or the echo box or an EVP session. And I speak a little bit of French, so So I can carry on those conversations as best as I can. One of them is definitely French, and male. And then there's another female that comes through. And then there's another, I think it's either someone who's more gender neutral. Because I can't really quite, because their voice is a little bit deeper, but it's almost like a very butch female or a very, or a male with a very high pitched voice. Like, it's really hard to quite pick up on it. And I'll get like a gender neutral name like Chris. And I'm like, well, and I have a gender neutral name too. I mean, it's Alex. I mean, you could be female or male or whichever, we identify with. So I'm like, okay, well, this is a little tough to pick up on. But then I'll occasionally pick up on Madison. And Madison's like the least dominant of that group. And I have to be very insistent. I'm like, hey, I want to talk to Madison. If Madison could come through, that'd be great, Otherwise, I have my 3, man, woman, possibly another male, female. It's hard to tell. So,
can you ask them?
I've tried, and it's always a very ambiguous answer. So it's almost like, it's just, we are, or we just are. And I'm just like, well, that doesn't help me. So, so yeah, it's an experience. Although I've noticed if I don't engage with Madison, well, I have Madison in a very, in a spot in my office where because we're talking 3 to 4 spirits, where they can kind of like survey everything and see everything. And because I noticed when I put Madison on the top shelf of right here, like, she would keep falling off. So finally I put her on the bottom shelf and she's been fine. So sometimes one of my cats will sit in her lap. So I'm like, okay, good. Y'all get along. That's good.
I was going to say your cat's probably knocked it over, but I'm sure you probably ruled some of that out a few times.
Yeah, at least with the top shelf, because the shelf here, if you put if they try to jump, the shelf would fall. So, yeah. So I'm like, well, all right. But I put Madison on the bottom, and that might be why Madison wants to be on the bottom, so that the cat can sit in her lap. My old calico cat, she's always sitting in Madison's lap, which is she doesn't do that with any other dolls.
Animals can feel the energy too, sense it, right?
That's what's believed. Yep.
Believed, key word there, not proven, believed. Yes, I like that. Specific.
Yeah, I have to be very careful with how I word things too, because at the end of the day, I can't prove any of this. So I always try to say this is what people believe or claim or alleged, because I also don't want to be harmful and be talking in absolutes, especially since I do work on residential cases. So I do come into people's homes and help assess things that are going on. And a lot of times I don't think the place is haunted. A lot of times I'm like, hey, we need to get a home inspector in and check the wiring, and we need to check on your HVAC system. We need to check for vermin.
All the normal stuff.
That a lot of people don't. Well, they do think about it, but then they don't do it. And I'll never forget the ones. There's been a couple stories actually. The most prominent one, I think it came out of Indiana, where this girl thought that maybe she had a ghost because, she would see things written on her bathroom mirror after she took a shower. Things were being moved. Things would go missing. And then come to find out that somebody had broken into her apartment and was hiding in her closet for weeks. And I'm like, that is terrifying. That is absolutely, that is more, I'd rather have the ghost,
Yeah. Because they're in the shower. You leave the door unlocked because you think you're alone. That's creepy on all levels. They go out, they do that, then they come back and hide. That is very creepy.
Yeah, extremely. Yeah, like I said, I'd rather have the ghost than an actual living person in my apartment. And when she found him, he was wearing her clothes and talking about how pretty she was. And meanwhile, she's messaging her boyfriend on her phone. She's like, oh yeah, thanks. I'm glad you like my shirt, and I'm glad you like my top. And she's texting her boyfriend, call 911 right now.
Yeah. Jesus, I cannot imagine. Yeah. Lock the doors, everybody. That might check your closets. Wow. Yeah. Okay. I want to learn more about your like this experience with, I guess, hearing these voices, if you will, or hearing the phenomena, because I'm still trying to understand the haunted doll aspect. So I just bear with me for a minute here. Mm-hmm. These other voices or other entities, if we will, were you hearing them before you got the doll?
No. So I do a lot of baseline checks. Okay. So when I was tracking the package with Madison, I just kind of did some baseline communication sessions just to make sure that I wasn't picking up on something that had always been around, or, I'm just looking to see what the changes were. And I mean, I'm not a science person, but I was like, well, I should probably take a baseline of seeing what is coming through currently on I was primarily using Phasmabox, which again is a program on the computer. It was like $20. It's cheap compared to some of this other equipment that's out there. And I find it to be the most accessible. Unfortunately, if you have an Apple computer, it is not accessible. The program only comes in Windows. And so did a couple baseline just to see like, hey, who's around. And I hadn't started collecting anything really at this point. So, I mean, I had a Ouija board, but it was like brand new in box, still in the plastic wrap from Spirit Halloween. Cause I love Ouija box lore. I love the mythology behind Ouija boards. I mean, I have one hanging out right next to me.
Just chilling.
Just chilling. So I hadn't really started collecting anything at this point. So, and anytime something new comes my way, I try to do baseline readings beforehand, just to do a temperature check. So after Madison came through, I gave it about a day to adjust, get used to surroundings. When Madison arrived, she had rosemary around her neck, which, depending on your beliefs and like kitchen magic, using different types of herbs, that sort of thing. Specifically, rosemary is used for, well, rosemary's been used in a bunch of stuff. Some people use it as like a smudge stick, or for smoke cleansing. I've seen it been used as like protection, cleansing, which when I saw the rosemary around her neck, I was like, wait a second. Why are we putting a cleansing and purification herb around the haunted doll's neck? So I found that to be a little perplexing, but it didn't seem to affect things too much. And it was in like a little tiny little jar. But I think it was meant to go on around the doll's neck for travel, to make sure smooth travels. It doesn't pick up anything else. There's so much that can be used for, rosemary. But, I took the rosemary off and let her sit for about a day and a half. And finally I was like, okay, let's do this little communication session. And actually the French guy came through pretty quickly, like pretty aggressively. And yeah, I actually recorded a few of the first sessions with Madison. I actually put them on my YouTube channel. And one of the questions that I asked the doll, and it was actually, this one's on my YouTube channel. I asked, what's my name? And the name that came, so I go by my middle name for anyone who's not familiar with me as a person. My middle name is Alexandra. I go by my middle name. But my first name is Catherine, and when I asked the doll, "What's my name?" Catherine came out, and I was like, "Okay, that's yeah." And that was a female voice that came through and said that, so I was like, "Okay, this is interesting." Yeah, and of course I did the stereotypical YouTube reaction of, but I was genuinely surprised because I don't hear my first name coming through very often. So yeah,
That'd be interesting too. I'm kind of a similar situation, but that hasn't been tested for me. Nobody knows. I use my first name's different, but that's besides the point.
Mm-hmm.
So I could understand where that's coming from, and it would be weird because that's like not a lot of people know that. I would ask questions like, "What's my social insurance number?" Like something, something along those lines that nobody can get, right? So what's interesting with what I'm hearing though is that nothing happened until you received the doll. So not only is this doll possessed by one entity, there appears to be multiple that showed up at the same time. So how is that possible? It's one object but multiple energies, or is that just a coincidence? Other things else come into the room. Like how does that work in your mind?
I think in some ways everyday objects could be like a beacon for spirits. But I also believe in the idea that, and I've been doing a lot of research on the parapsychology side and metaphysical theories and whatnot, and I've become very well acquainted with spontaneous apparitions. So spontaneous apparitions are essentially an apparition that you could see from the living. So like if I'm going through an extremely traumatic moment and I like in like this room and I needed to get my fiance's attention who's in the other room, with a spontaneous apparition I could project my consciousness to him to tell him, hey, I need help. This has been documented quite often with like car accident victims. Like if someone was in a car accident and their grandma from across the country like sees their grandchild and they call their kid and saying, hey, you need to check on your kid, something's going on. This has been documented quite a few times. I feel like this is really going down the rabbit hole with theories.
I the tinfoil hat.
I know, right? So I feel like our maybe consciousness or our energy can almost be like fragmented. I actually experienced this in real time. Was it a year ago? Almost a year ago. It was before I moved. Where we could leave parts of our energies behind and we're still alive. So I don't know how many hands Madison went through. The story I was told was she was part of an estate sale that the seller was a part of. The seller is, does that, collects antiques and whatnot. And Madison was in that pallet. So I don't know how many hands Madison may have had up until then. Madison may have had several owners, or maybe somebody felt really fond of that doll and kept it for a while and then passed it on to somebody else.
How old is the doll itself?
The doll's about, from what the research I did, the doll was built around the 80s. So it's actually about my age. So which I'd like to say is not terribly old, but they're built in the late 70s, early 80s. When I was doing research. So it's not like a really old doll. It's, I could see how because the doll is not distressed at all. The doll looks pretty good for its age. I mean, the hair still looks great and the clothing. And I mean, she smelled a little musty when she came around, but, did a little bit of Febreze and, let her air out a bit. And, I could definitely smell that she had been in storage for a while, because you just know that smell when you open up that Rubbermaid container that hasn't been opened in 20 years. That's that smell. So, so I think either a spirit was hanging around and ran into Madison, was like, I like this thing, I want to hang out with it for a while, or Madison collected the energies of previous hands. And well, considering that Madison belonged to the old woman named Madison and she really loved that doll, there's probably, and Madison had grandchildren and apparently great grandchildren too. I wouldn't be surprised if someone one of her family members took the doll for a while just to kind of feel close, close to Madison after she passed, and possibly transferred some energy into the doll. So I did reach out to the seller and I said, hey, do you know if Madison like had family members that may have been French, or, is there anyone named Chris? And the seller's like, I don't talk to my clients after I buy things. I don't go that deep. And I'm like, okay, so I'm like, all right, I guess it's just all theory at this point. I would love it if I got some confirmation. So, yeah.
Yeah, it depends. It's hard because but what's interesting though is that you didn't have that experience. Then you received this doll. Now you're having all of this activity. Now, prior to that, were you able to communicate with those that have passed on prior to this experience?
I'd like to think so.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is where it's like, I've had experiences that I believe are paranormal, and I've communicated with who I believe to be those who have passed on. I've been a paranormal investigator, an active, serious paranormal investigator researcher for about 11 years now. And I chose that it's been 11 years, but I've also been just kind of dabbling into spooky stuff since I was in high school, and I had my first experiences when I was 7 years old. So it's been an off and on relationship. But I started my team, the Association of Paranormal Study, in 2011 with the sole goal of investigating people's homes. And that came from having my own experiences with an entity and I wasn't able to find help. My mom and I were not able to find help for that. And that was 2006 when that happened. So the TV show Ghost Hunters was maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years old. Paranormal community was not what it is today. So throughout my investigation years, I have had encounters that I believe have been with people who have passed on. So several times per year, you could say. So, yeah.
Cool. So what happened when you were 7?
Yes.
Ooh.
Okay. Let's dive into that. Yeah, so I used to spend my summers in Kentucky, in this really small town in the tri-state area of Kentucky, which is right deep into Appalachia. If you go across one bridge, you go to West Virginia. You go across the other bridge, you go to Ohio. So this is truly my family would, whenever we visited family, we'd go have pizza in Canova, West Virginia. And then if we wanted to go for ice cream, we'd go to Ohio, to Ironton. It's very much we just hop states, it's fine. So very much I was exposed to Appalachian lore pretty early in my life. I didn't know it was Appalachian lore until I realized there was a name for it about 10 years ago. It's and I heard the stories, or I had the experiences of hey, if you hear your name called in the woods, don't go in the woods. Don't look at the woods at night. Don't go out after dark. It was country dark at night, country dark. And this is a kid who grew up in San Diego. So going to Kentucky, Appalachia, Kentucky in the summers to visit my grandma's family, that was just entering into Oz. It was like Dorothy going to Oz. Very different from a city beach lifestyle to the woods. So I crack up because it was literally a dark and stormy night when this whole thing happened. Leading up to that, I used to hear bangings on the side of my great grandmother's house, my mama's house. And my mama would literally say oh, you better pray, child. That's the devil trying to get in. And, growing up in a fundamental Christian household, that's terrifying to tell a child. I've seen pretty weird footprints too. And I saw a weird footprint in my mama's garden, probably a year after that experience, or year before. So there's a lot of spooky stuff happening in this area of the world. And dark and stormy night, I look outside, because I living in San Diego where it's sunny and in this like low 70s 365 days out of the year, you don't see rain a lot. I didn't see a lot of storms very often, so I was looking outside because I'm like, this is really cool. I didn't know it could rain like this. I didn't know rain could go sideways. I see this hooded figure hanging out. So the way that my mama's property is, my family still owns it. Its house is on a hill. They're all on it's all on a hill. I see this hooded figure hanging out on the hill. So like I'm looking at this hooded figure standing on the hill. It's raining sideways. It's windy. It's like the lightning is going off. It's like strobe lights outside. This hooded figure is not phased at all. Like it's the garments on its robe aren't even blowing with the wind. And I'm sitting here like, wait, what? And that's also breaking like Appalachian folklore rule number 1, like don't be looking outside after dark. And I'm just staring at this figure. I'm like, that's so weird. And then I get spooked by it, so I close the curtains because I'm thinking like maybe it's one of my cousins trying to scare me because they do that. I open the curtain, I look again, and the lightning flashes, and I can see that the hooded figure got closer to the window. I'm like, okay, close the curtain again, and I'm like, did it get closer? I open the curtain again, and it's getting closer and closer to the window, and I was like, okay, I need to stop looking outside. So I rushed to the bed that's right, it's next to the window. And this is a house it's not the fanciest house. The mattress I was sleeping on, literally, like it didn't sink when you sat in it. It tilted. And the way the sleeping arrangements were, I was a little bit spooked in the dark. So my mama would sleep with me at night. And whenever my mama got into bed, the mattress would tilt and my body would slide, but she would stop me from sliding off the bed. So I go to the bed, I put the covers over my head. I'm freaked out. The mattress tips and I'm thinking, oh, thank goodness Mama's here. I slide completely off the bed. Like there's nothing there there's nothing there that I could see that would be causing this bed to tilt. And as I'm looking up the mattress, it just goes like it just goes right back to where it was. Like something had gotten up and walked away. It was the spookiest thing that happened to me as a 7-year-old. And that was probably my first glimpse of, ooh, that's cool. I was like, oh, that's cool. But whoa, that happened. It was like that mix of being really excited and then that mix of like, what just happened?
It's interesting because it affected like an object in real time too, because you can almost think that maybe you saw this if it was a person, then yeah, they're braving the storm. But like as you mentioned with the garments not even moving, right? So you would think with a very busy storm that you would at least see that. So that's a very good point to make, that perhaps they weren't in that dimension or in this other dimension in which you were able to see at a young age. And then so the entity wasn't on the bed though, wasn't anywhere near the bed. That was something separate, the bed moving.
Yeah, it was just the weirdest thing. So I don't know, like, and at that stage too, like I think I was about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. Actually, it might have been less than that. Since my grandfather had passed away, and he and I were very close. We were extremely close when he was alive, and a part of me was wondering, like, well, maybe that was him just to reassure, like, that we're okay. I'm not sure if what I saw outside was related to whatever was inside. It's an interesting.
Have you ever had witnessed any poltergeist activity?
I don't think so, at least not from myself, although I was pretty hormonal and pretty like going through trauma, especially throughout my teen years. So anything weird that did happen, I wouldn't be surprised. I did have a really minor incident. I mean, I say minor, but it could probably spook the average Joe. When it was in the house that I had basically grown up in. But but it was my grandmother's house in San Diego. My mom and I hadn't lived there yet. We weren't living there yet. I had gone into one of the bedrooms. It had 2 twin beds in the room. It was technically the guest room. I remember laying down on one of the beds, and then something smacked my forehead. It was like something just went, while I was laying down. There was no shelves on the wall above the bed. Because we live in San Diego, earthquakes are a thing. You tend to not put anything, we don't put anything above your head. Because earthquakes, that's a real thing. So that was a bit strange. And then that ended up being my bedroom once we did move in with my grandmother. And I did have some weird, spooky things happen in that room.
Like what?
Throughout the years. So some of this is, where do I begin with this one? So I feel like my paranormal experiences throughout my life have been like in layers. I don't know what smacked me on the forehead when I was a kid. Could have been anything. Could have been poltergeist activity. It could have been some entity hanging out around the house. So let's see. It was my senior year of high school. Homeschooling my senior year because regular school it wasn't the best learning environment for me. And I had an instance of sleep paralysis, but I was very much awake. I couldn't move my body. And when I opened my eyes, I see this like, gosh, y'all are going to think I'm crazy. So I see this woman, all black skin. Her clothes were the same hue, but there was a gold outline around her. And literally she just went, I see her and she just goes, shh, as I'm having this episode. And it scared the crap out of me. And this is 18-year-old Alex going through this. I chalked that up to maybe I was just going through a lot of stress with college applications and, just
see. That's why I asked the poltergeist question, because you even mentioned hey, to defend it, I guess, if you will, the hormonal aspect of your life, because so you obviously understand the alleged association between having these emotions and then creating a poltergeist phenomenon of the psychic ability from ourselves. And so the reason why I asked that question is because I was thinking that perhaps seeing that figure for the first time, the bed moved by you because it was terrifying. And that could have been the first time you moved an object, which happens to be a very large bed for a 7-year-old. That is a huge psychic ability.
Yep.
What do you think? Is that possible?
Oh, 100%. I think that could be possible. And even with my experiences after, that are depicted in One Bed Over, even to this day, I wonder, was this just me processing the traumatic experience that I had? And now, granted, my mother also experienced similar activity. She didn't visually see it like an entity, but she saw objects moving and everything. I saw an actual person. She saw, if the person was knocking something over, I would see the person and the object being knocked over. My mom would only see the object being knocked over. So, and that with that car accident, it was a very traumatic experience. I almost didn't make it. And I put a whole chapter about it at the end of the book where I basically try to debunk myself, because I wanted to be a little bit balanced with this book and not just, hey, this is me dealing with a spirit attachment. It was, okay, was this me processing the trauma? Was this me processing survivor's guilt that I managed to personify into this entity that looks just like the guy who was in the trauma room with me who didn't make it, that kind of situation. Yeah, I have actually always wondered that, whether that was some sort of poltergeist activity, was it all me in the first place, Well,
so, it can be measured. That's what I'm saying. So have you and I'm sorry you had to go through that traumatic experience, but you were able to write a book about it, which is, I'm sure, very, very helpful for yourself and others. Which is that one of the books that we're going to talk about, or is that a previous book?
Yeah, so One Bed Over, that's my most recent release. This book came out in September, October, fall of 2022 was when this, or 2021 when this book came out. Yes, that one.
Okay.
I put that book out after the Haunted Hospitals episode aired because I wanted to, so while Haunted Hospitals did a great job telling my story. Things were a little dramatic in a few spots. Like, I didn't scream nearly as much as the TV show, depicted. I wasn't just in my wheelchair like a screaming banshee every time something moved. I got a little numb to the whole thing. At one point, I was just like, okay, this is a thing. Yeah, so I put the book out just to make sure, but I didn't know that Haunted Hospitals was going to do a good job telling my story. Like, I hadn't seen the final episode, and I was like, I should just put this out. I should just start writing this just in case. And they did a good job, but they couldn't put everything in. Like, this was an ordeal that lasted for about eight months, and my segment was only about 20 minutes. So, there was a lot that they couldn't include. In my opinion, they did include a pretty dramatic encounter that happened, but that wasn't like the encounter that, that was really the most terrifying. They chose this moment when my mom and I were at home, and it was like this. It was almost like a sonic boom happened in the house where everything just kind of, like, anything that was on the walls, anything that was on shelves just like fell off. Like, the TV show Haunted Hospitals, they depicted it as things were falling off the walls like one at a time. And, the actors playing my mom and I were like, bah, bah, very like lots of screaming, when really it was more like a sonic boom type of thing. And keep in mind, we live in San Diego. There's like 5 military bases around us. So it was a legit, like, okay, was this a thing? But my mom got spooked and she started reading from the Bible and could literally, like, the entity that I believe either was me or a conscious entity started laughing when she read from the Bible, and my mom witnessed this. So, that was like what they included in the TV show. The most terrifying moment for me was when, during my surgery recovery, my car accident recovery, after I was able to go home, I had really amazing friends. I still do. They're still in my life. I had really amazing friends who were making an effort to make sure that I was included still in day-to-day activities or social events. So they would literally pick me up at home, load my wheelchair into the trunk, and it's like, hey, Alex, let's go on an adventure today. And on one of those occasions, one of my friends from college, she took me to school. I didn't enroll that semester because of the car accident, but she brought me to school on a day where, all of my friends would be on campus, when all the theater classes would be in session. So she was like, yeah, let's go hang out. But then when they were all in class, I went to the library to hang out. Might as well. My library card, my ID still worked, even though I wasn't enrolled, but I can go to the library. And I saw the entity that I called the man in the leather jacket, because that's what he wore, a leather jacket. And I saw him at the library. Like, I could see him in between the book stacks, and I could visually see him, and scared me. And I'm sitting here in my wheelchair, like, rolling as fast as I can through the aisles to try to get to the elevator. That one was the scariest moment for me, but I could see why the TV show didn't include it, because set wise, they'd have to recreate a library, or they would have to go shoot at a library. So I think that might have been more of a logistical choice, but I wanted to make sure that my story was still told. The full story could be told. And people who watched the episode, a lot of them did read the book afterwards, and they were just like, oh, holy cow. Like, there was a lot more to this than the 20 minutes that we saw in Haunted Hospitals. So, yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, 20 minutes is a good segment too, because most screen time is like 5 minutes. So that's huge. What episode is that? Season what was that again?
It was season 3, episode 12.
Episode 12, and it was called "It Followed Me Home." Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. I think that's what the segment's called. So yeah.
I didn't realize it's been season 3 already. So when Haunted Hospitals started, I did some research for them for Haunted Hospitals #1, season 1. And I connected them with a few experiencers that were on there in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just now 3 years. Time has gone quite the bit. Okay, so I'm tracking that your mother was able to see these entities as well. And your did you say mama, your grandma?
We have my grandma, who is my mom's mom, and then we have my mama. She's my grandmother's mother.
Okay, on the same lineage though, like so your mother, your mother, then your grandmother, then your grandmother's mother.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky enough to have all of them alive still today, so that's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, they've all since passed, but I did have all of them at one point, which a lot of people didn't get that, So.
Did your grandmother and your grandmother's mother, were they able to see any paranormal entities?
I'm not sure about my grandma. My grandma was a very straightforward person. But my mama and my mother were very spiritual, metaphysical. Man, my mama told me some of the best, these would be great Southern Gothic stories. But she swore up and down that they happened. And my mama she was born in 1911. So she was exposed to a time period in America that, she saw, she was born, I want to say about a month or so after the Titanic sank. So, it's kind of crazy that my great grandmother was alive, just existing as a baby during that time. But, she saw, I don't know how far back her memory went, but World War I, definitely the Great Depression. My grandma was born in 1930. So, apparently my grandma's family were making moonshine for the Kennedys. Apparently they had run-ins with the Hatfields and the McCoys too, in the moonshine business. But my mama told me some really interesting stories that we would consider to be Appalachia folklore. It's very old gods of Appalachia, stories as she was telling me. So I'm inclined to, and my mama and that whole side of the family, they also are free will Baptists, which is it's the closest thing to Pentecostal you can get without the snakes. Free will Baptists are a whole level of Christian spiritual lore. And like I said, it's they're one step away from handling snakes, but speaking in tongues is a thing. They're very spiritually charged. And so, I could see my grandmother not falling for that. And my grandma was very much a rebel in her time. She was married. She got married really young. She had her first kid when she was 17. Left that abusive marriage, met my grandpa. My grandma was really the rule breaker because in the 50s, my grandma marries a Japanese man, which post World War II, that's a pretty bold move to do, especially a decade or so after World War II. My grandpa literally had to wear his military uniform whenever he would visit, anytime he actually left the base, because that was the other thing. He was also stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the 50s. So we have the whole alien side of my family too. That is crazy.
All connected. It's all connected.
It's all, but it's all in that same area because where my grandmother grew up, they're about an hour away from Point Pleasant, West Virginia. So that's a whole other thing to
Mothman.
That whole, yep. Oh yeah. My grandma's brothers used to, go in their pickup trucks and go Mothman hunting, in the 60s and 70s. That was big news. That was huge for them. So, And considering that's when my grandma's prime adulthood would have been, because my grandmother and her brothers, there was a bit of an age gap between them. So I could see my grandma looking at all of this and being like, nah, I don't know. But then my mother's spiritual path is still perplexes me to this day. My mom was very conservative Christian, but she told me that, she dabbled in the occult when she was pregnant with me. But when I was like, okay, what are we talking about? Occult here. She was, and keep in mind, fundamental Christian. She was like, oh, I dabbled in the occult. I used pendulums and dowsing rods. And I'm sitting here like, okay, I wouldn't really consider that like devil worship or the occult or anything like that. I'd see more of that as divination. But also my mother was a Reiki master. So I think that can be explained though from a cultural perspective, because like I mentioned, my grandpa's Japanese. So which means my mom is half and I'm a quarter. The women in my grandfather's family were very much, Reiki healers. So I think that was more of a generational, like pass it on type of thing. And my mom stuck with it. Because anytime I got hurt, my mom would use Reiki on me. And I didn't even know it was Reiki. She didn't name it. Like, one time I cut my finger open and we were on our way to the hospital. And my mom just puts her hand around my finger and I could feel the warmth. I could feel it. And, but she never told me what it was. It wasn't until maybe a couple years before she died, I started looking into Reiki because I was just curious about it. And I'm like, holy cow, Mom, come on.
Well, they also lived in a time where they couldn't really be open about it. It had to have been suppressed and all that other stuff. You naturally evolved into it genetically. That's what I was looking for when I asked that question, to see how far back it goes. Because, starting at an early age, because my research is studying the people, trying to understand why they are the way that they are, and that's why I'm asking these frames of questions to figure out how it's starting to see what's common. And usually with children and starting at a younger age, it's likely generational that they don't know about. So you were born with whatever this is, perhaps allegedly, and it's just more enhanced because it's at least that you can track 3 generations. So I would not be surprised if it was you that moved that bad. And it can be measured. So have you ever tried to move objects yourself just for shits and giggles, if you will?
I've tried. And I don't know if I've tried hard enough. I've noticed that when things have moved around me, I'm very much emotionally heightened. Like I remember when I was 16, my mom and I will be the first to say, we loved each other, but we had a very volatile relationship. And then heighten that with teenage hormones and not really knowing like how I'm supposed to exist type of thing. I was dealing with, I was dealing with a little bit of some gender identity issues, body image issues. I mean, teenager. I remember when one time my mom was kind of getting on my case and not letting up, like just pile on after pile on after pile on, to the point I said, would you shut up? And when I said up, like these books from like her shelf that she had in the hallway going into the bedrooms and the bathroom fell off the shelf. And it was just like this little boom. I was like, would you shut up? And it just...
So that's emotion, and then that's energy that expelled, that went. The books weren't on the shelf properly, so it was just enough force for them to fall down.
Yeah, so that was one that I'm like, okay, that one's a little weird. But yeah, sitting there and actually trying to make something move, I haven't. I haven't.
Well,
really
I
done
want
it
you to
long
try.
enough.
I want you to try, because now, since you don't know that and that hasn't happened in real time, we know that it's recorded. You try it. If it works, I want to know.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'll try it, and especially
so,
next time I'm upset.
well, great power comes great responsibility. All those other things too. Don't don't go all what is it, Scarlet Witch.
Oh, I know, right?
So CC asked the question: does Alex still see ghosts or spirits visually, or was that secluded to your youth experience?
That's a good question. Yeah, so I will say I have not seen spirits that vividly since that whole incident in One Bed Over. Um, well, it's happened once more. It's happened once more. And that was actually this year. But so the other times I've seen apparitions, it's usually been like a very fragmented apparition. Like when I was on the USS North Carolina, I was in a certain part of the ship by myself. And I saw a pair of legs, just a pair of legs, walk through the door, walk past the doorway, just a pair of legs. That was it. When I was on the USS Hornet, I saw green balls of light flying around the sick bay. That was a trip. But yeah, in terms of like seeing it the way that I saw the man in the leather jacket, or even like the spirit of like what I thought was a ballerina when I was a kid, doing a show at this historic theater. Yeah, I haven't since, but I did see it recently. So I haven't seen it since up until I think it was May or June of this year. I'm also wedding planning, so dates right now are very like messy for me. So I was in Gettysburg. I was doing an investigation with my team. I should not have been doing this investigation because I had a family member that passed away that I was very close to. So I was grieving. It brought up a lot of like trauma from when my mother passed. So I was not in a good headspace at all. Like I shouldn't have been out there. And it also happened to be a full moon that night, and the planets were also in perfect planetary alignment. I've always joked that I'm about as psychic as a hot pile of garbage, because I've always made that joke. I'm like, I'm about as intuitive or psychic as a hot pile of garbage. And I've always made the joke that the planets would have to be perfectly aligned in order for me to see things. So on this particular night, we were at the Jenny Wade house. I had been crying all day. Again, I should not have been there. I was exhausted. This investigation was happening from like midnight to 2 a.m. It was a rough night. And I'm sitting there, and my team's trying to make communication with Jenny Wade or whoever is around, and I'm sitting in the room next to the kitchen where Jenny Wade was shot. And I've been looking down most of the time, and then I start hearing a voice. I start hearing a voice responding to my team, and I'm like, is somebody talking right now? No one's talking. And I look up, and I see this man sitting on the bed across from me. I could hear him talk, but he wasn't moving his mouth. And but he wasn't attached to the Jenny Wade house. The way he presented himself was he was just passing by, which I wouldn't be surprised in Gettysburg. Gettysburg has a lot going on spiritually that I think it could attract a lot of transients because of the trauma that happened on the land, the amount of people that visit it, and the amount of people that are putting energy into the stories behind the hauntings. Like, I have a whole theory about Gettysburg. And I'm just seeing this gentleman. And so my team member, who's a historian, I know my history, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Like, if I do a lot of research on a topic, I can be pretty well versed in it. Give me like 3 days. But in this case, this man seemed to be from like the 20s or 30s, which would have been about 50, 60, 70 years after the battle. And my historian, she's sitting here like asking contextual stories or contextual questions about the time period that we're guessing that this guy is from. And he's telling me, and I'm telling her, and we're getting it right. And I'm like, huh, okay, that's a little strange. Yeah. So, and he was just passing through, nothing connected to Gettysburg at all, except that his granddaddy fought in the war, but he was on the wrong side. Like, he was just passing through to check it out. And I thought that was a little weird and interesting. But that's been the only other time. And in that situation, I was going through extreme emotional stress, exhaustion, and
see, it's stress, it's trauma. It's definitely you. You can so that's there's the pattern right there. Okay, so we're gonna pause right here, but we'll continue after a message from our sponsors. If you're listening to the audio only version, head over to youtube.com/the Experiencers Support Association. So you can see the video that goes with this audio. Remember, you are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, a podcast by the Experiencers Support Association, and we'll be right back.
It's your business. It's your property. Your assets are worth protecting. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services specializes in patrolling and inspecting residential or commercial property against fire, theft, vandalism, terrorism, and illegal activity. People and buildings are monitored to prevent crime. Keep your property, your people, and your assets safe from threat. Our elite staff are dual licensed private investigators and security guards. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services. Go to blacklightiss.com.
The same thing that draws aliens to our planet is the same thing that draws us to others. Exploration, curiosity, sustainability of life. That's why we go. It would make sense as to why they're visiting here.
Travis! Quit playing around, man. Get back here. Travis!
The last thing I remember was this numbing shock. Stunning sort of a feeling. Very powerful.
Get away from me!
I was just out of my mind with fear, just screaming the whole time.
It's been theorized that aliens prefer remote areas because they don't want to attract attention. Whatever it is that they're doing, they would want to do that in a less populated area. There are multiple accounts of the same thing from people from all over the world. People that do not know each other, do not live in the same cultures, and they're all looking up, they're all seeing things in the sky. So it would be naive of us to think that
Ryan is one of Canada's leading new UFO investigators. He conducts and oversees UFO investigations on a constant basis and was really taken by his research. He's compiled a tremendous amount of data regarding UFOs in Canada. And just as interesting, he really goes over how UFO investigations are done and what are some of the mistakes that people make when they submit evidence. Note for starters, don't edit your videos or photos before you send them. If you want to hear more follow-up conversation between Ryan and myself, you can go to richardolanmembers.com, where we have a candid conversation on ufology, the paranormal, and more. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth, let's be good to each other.
Welcome to the Observation Deck, a state-of-the-art, one-of-a-kind virtual platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus, just like you would in real life. First, you install the application and design your very own unique avatar. Then you're free to explore the various areas of the campus at any time from anywhere. There's so many areas and activities to choose from on the platform. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, a large expo hall, a movie theater, a nightclub, an art gallery, and even a beach. Come attend a conference or take a class or hear a lecture. Meet new friends and interact directly with presenters. It's all right here on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Where in the world will you go?
Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? You know, people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today by going to tesacan.org/EA. That's TESACAN.org/EA.
All right, welcome back. You are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Have you ever experienced an unexplained event involving the paranormal, UFO, extraterrestrial, Bigfoot, Dogman, or any other paracryptid? Head over to our website, www.experiencersupport.org, and submit a report. Let the others who have already reported be that example that proves we are making a difference. If it wasn't for those reports, we would not be able to do what we do, and for that, we thank you. And if you want to get one of these cool hats here, you can get it from tinfoilcap.co, and every purchase goes to support the Leak Project from Rex Bear. So thank you, Rex, for giving me this Marty McFly tinfoil hat. All right. How you doing, Alex?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. Okay. I'm interested in investigations. I don't get many investigators on here. And I'm always interested, being an investigator myself, learning different processes, and everyone does it different. So what does an investigation look like to you? Someone calls you, like, from the moment you get a call. Walk me through that.
Yeah. So when somebody contacts me wanting me and or my team, usually me and my team, to come in and do an investigation in their home, we will direct them to a form that they need to fill out online. So this would be on my team's website. And we ask things like name, address, your basics, but we also ask questions like, has the cops ever been called to your place? What sort of medication are you taking? And, tell us more about what happened leading up to the paranormal experience, and just trying to get as much of a picture as we can. Mostly because we want to make sure that our presence would not be more damaging. Because, we do get people who are dealing with various illnesses, especially mental health issues. And a lot of times they'll want to lean, and I'm not saying this as a baseline for anyone who's dealing with mental health issues or mental illnesses. This is just the ones that contact us in particular. They'll sort of look to us for validation that it's something paranormal and not something that they need to get treated. So it's important to me to make sure that we rule that out, because we don't want our presence to cause more damage or prevent them from saying, well, because sometimes just talking to us is validation of like, well, I was talking to ghost hunters and I don't need to take my meds anymore for schizophrenia. Like, we've actually had that happen, and we're like, whoa, we did not say that, Yeah. So we try to, so in that initial beginning stages, we do try to keep a paper trail as much as we can, just in case, because, paranormal teams have been sued in the past for damages and, causing emotional suffering. And, we want to make sure we have our bases covered. And then after they fill out a form, if we feel like we can move forward, we will. And usually my case manager will then interview the client to determine, do we think that they might be lying about what's going on, or could there be something else happening? We do ask on the form if they're open to having their haunting being debunked. And if they say no, it's not that we won't take that case, is we'll be very cautious when we take that case, because ultimately we want to.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so we just want to make sure that who we're working with at least has an open mind, and not just looking for us to validate something, which is always fun.
Mm-hmm. No, that's interesting way of asking too, because you can kind of get an idea of what outcome they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And if they want to believe, there's nothing you can do to tell them that it's not that, because they're going to argue with you, which makes the investigation a little bit harder, especially when you're putting in your time and your resources.
Yep.
So I appreciate that question for sure. Okay, what happens next?
Yeah, so if they pass that stage, then it comes to me. Like I'll do the initial screening and passing it on to my case manager. But other than that, I'll be hands off and I'll let my case manager work their magic, because most of my case managers, majority usually have a background in mental health. So either they're a licensed social worker or they're a therapist. Because they can give me the best picture of the situation. I don't have that expertise. So I let them handle it, and they're the ones who really assess, like, is it safe for us to move forward with the case? Do we believe that they believe what's happening? Because we've had people flat out just lie. And we're like, okay, well, do they believe that what's happening is paranormal? And if they don't, then we're like, we're not going to waste our time. Because then it turns into a safety issue. Like, well, why are you calling us if you don't, if this is just BS? So then it comes to me, and then I will interview the client. And usually what my case manager will do to prepare the client, and they'll just say, listen, I know you told me a lot of these answers before. This is just talking to my director now. And, she just wants to get a good picture of what's going on. But that will also turn into a prep call as well. So what we'll usually do is we'll schedule like an initial visit where me and maybe my case manager, or even me and maybe my psychic medium that I may or may not bring in, depends. We'll visit the house, because I want to make sure that the location is safe for my team members. I've been to some houses where it was like an episode of Hoarders, and I'm like, yeah, we can't investigate your home. I'm sorry, or we will come, but you need to you need to clean up a little bit, or, just making sure that the area is safe for us. Depending on what the client needs sometimes. So we range it between, like, do they just need someone to talk to? Like, do they just want to, we get a lot of people who just want to tell us their story, which is great. We'll get people who are like, hey, can you at least come visit and just see if you sense anything spooky, or we get the full out, we need an investigation. So usually that's what those home visits are for. If they need an investigation, it's like, okay, well, this is what we need to do to prepare. We also survey like the town, because usually we're traveling out of town. I'm like, okay, is there a hotel nearby? Is there a food source nearby? That sort of thing.
A lot of expenses for you to take care of that too. So, like, how do you guys get compensated for that, or do you guys just do that out of the kindness of your own team's hearts?
So we do that in a few different ways. So the team agreed. They agreed. I actually wasn't a huge fan of this, but the team pays dues. They pay between $10 to $20 per month, and that goes into a fund. But we also monetize our website. So we write articles for the team page, and, try to bring in some money that way. Because we're technically an LLC, so we don't take donations. We're an LLC, and we're not a C14. I'm trying to remember what bracket we're in, but we don't take donations. We do have a few clients sometimes who will like slip us a 20 when we're done, and they're like, hey, go buy yourself some dinner, when, after all of this is over. And we're like, okay, cool. We'll quietly take it if they really insist. But other than that, we just do it out of the kindness of our hearts. We pay our monthly dues, and we've done business things too. Like we like down in Fayetteville, North Carolina, a couple years ago, we did ghost tours for a month, and we were paid by a radio station to do that. And that covered our hotel, our gas, our travel. And that was purely a business relationship. But we took that money, we put it in a fund, we put it in a bank account. And so now we use it for, like, if we need team shirts, travel expenses, or, we've had times where we've had a team member go through really, financially difficult times, and we'll take a vote, and it's like, hey, can we help this team member with their phone bill? We'll do it to, like, help each other. And for me, like, I don't mind pouring my own money into the paranormal, but I am glad that that fund is there so that my team members can enjoy that as well. And then we get about, I want to say, a couple $100 every 6 months from monetizing the website. So that's decent fund as well. So that gives us the opportunity to travel, and we don't have to charge clients. And
yeah. So that's kind of what I was looking for too. Like, I mean, that was a much more detailed explanation of your finances that I was looking for, but I appreciate your openness with that. The main thing that I appreciate too is that it's at no cost to the experiencer. So you are providing a service, even though you're not collecting donations, you are doing service work. And it's good that you have a good business model that works to cover your expenses, because this stuff isn't cheap. And it also makes sense as to why you have these questions in your questionnaire, to make sure that it's justifiable to spend the little means that you have for these things. So it all makes sense. There's nothing wrong with making the means to do this work. There's a lot of people doing that, and at the same time, it helps lend credibility to you guys as investigators when you go in, if they're not paying you to do that, because then they come back and say, well, we paid you X amount of dollars, so you're going to tell us, and that's this certain way, because they want something out of that. Yeah. So you remove the option of having to do something in order to get paid. So the money is needed, but it's not the reason.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. And that's good. And I like that. And I appreciate that. Okay. So you get in there, everything's fine. You're stayed, you've done your research, you're fed, there's a food source nearby, you got a hotel, you don't have to worry about all that other stuff. You leave the hotel and you go to the place. What happens as soon as you get there?
Yeah. So when we arrive on site, I will have the client sign. Usually they sign it before, not thanks to the innovation of the internet, liability paperwork. So this is the business side of paranormal investigating that a lot of people don't talk about. We make the client sign a liability paperwork. We also actually have them do an audit of all of their valuables. It's never happened to us, but I have heard of other teams getting accused of like stealing jewelry and that sort of thing. So we have the client do an audit of their valuables. Grandma's wedding ring, $6,000 TV. I mean, I don't know how we would walk out with a $6,000 TV, but just in case.
Do you include the client in the investigation?
We do. So we give them the option to stay. But if we do have cases where we do suspect maybe poltergeist or psychokinetic activity, we may ask the client to leave the premises for a couple hours, and obviously with their permission, and that's what the paperwork is for.
Yeah, if you keep them there, then that liability goes away because they're witness.
Yep. Yeah. So but I mean, we also have part of the liability paperwork is like, hey, is it okay if we set up cameras, in your home, and is it okay that we talk to your children, so we want to have our bases covered in every aspect. So once all of that is cleared and good to go, then, we'll set up our tech, and we do prep the client as well, saying like, hey, it's probably going to we try to set up as many expectations as we can so that the client's not surprised. Because that's where sometimes people get in trouble, is they don't set up the proper expectations, and it's like, well, wait a minute, I brought you here to investigate my home, but you've spent 2 hours setting up cameras. We just want to make sure everything is good to go. So we'll set up the equipment. We'll baseline everything. We'll take baseline readings. So we'll check the EMF. We'll check electromagnetic fields in the house. We'll actually sit in silence for about 15 minutes just to kind of learn the language of the house, to see, okay, the ground rumbles every 20 minutes. Okay, there's a semi truck coming through. So we'll just make sure that we're getting everything baselined as we can, so that we can measure any anomalies that may pop up. So, and a lot of times that's where we get a lot of debunking done, and we're able to explain most of the activity that's happening. We had one client, I don't know if this would be one of our successful cases, but she was so certain that she was possessed by a demon. We go into her home, and this was actually during the initial walkthrough, and found that her living room and her kitchen was all full of computers that were on. because I guess she worked in tech support. But we're talking like maybe 20 computers that were on and running so she could do her tech support job. EMF levels were off the charts.
Yeah.
And so, we were like, okay, well, could
you even baseline that? That might be too high of a peak.
It was too high of a peak. Yeah. So it was one of those like, hey, can you turn off these computers? Like, is it possible? And she couldn't because of her job. And we're like, well, we can't really do much. But we'll have other situations where, we'll go in, we'll do the baseline readings. We'll find the EMF is very low or non-existent. And then, of course, when we start our line of questioning, we'll introduce ourselves to the space. And, we do our whole like, hi, my name is Alex. I hear you have been showing yourself to Janet, and, we just want to get to know you and talk to you and, that sort of thing. And actually clients are a little surprised at how we speak to the space. And I'm like, well, if it's real and there is something anomalous there is an entity there, I want them to know that we're friendly. And if not, worst case scenario is we're being polite to the empty space, worst case scenario. So we'll do our like introductions and we'll let the client stay. Usually we defer to let the client stay with us because, liability. And plus if they're the trigger for the activity, then we do want them there. So we'll, we interview the clients and everything. We'll try to get the full context of like their experiences. Like, were they folding laundry? Were they sleeping? Were they playing duck, duck, goose? That sort of thing. And we'll actually try to replicate those moments. So it's like, hey, I'm going to go into the laundry room and start folding laundry to see if I see the shadow that creeps in through the peripheral, like the client was reporting. And sometimes that's worked. Sometimes it's worked just reenacting the events that, where something anomalous happens. Sometimes that's been effective. So we try to do a little bit of everything when it comes to getting a full picture.
So what equipment do you set up? You got cameras, obviously EMF detectors. What tools are you using to measure and to capture your evidence?
Yeah. So we use a surveillance system. We have an 8-camera surveillance system. So that could go in. Usually we tend to position them in the hot spots of the home. So if things are happening in the baby's room, oh yeah, there's a camera going in the baby's room. Same thing with like the hallway. We'll also try to set up a camera usually in the exterior as well, just to rule out anything that's happening outside. And we also use audio recorders. We'll have different audio recorders and microphones set up. So I do have a travel mic, a travel dynamic mic, as well as a condenser mic. So condenser mics are usually, dynamic mics are good for like open spaces, but if you really need to isolate sound, they're pretty good about that. Condenser mics will capture everything like that's happening in a room. So, and that does give us like 50 hours of audio that we have to review, but in a team of 4, that could be manageable in chunks,
Does anybody take notes?
Oh yeah, we take notes and we will call it out. So usually what we'll do is we'll clap to baseline everything at 0. And we'll take the time like, okay, we're at 0 at 9:25 p.m. Just to, yeah. So when something
you're looking at your audio too, you can see for your spikes and get rid of that graph.
Yep. And same thing with our surveillance, with our cameras, we'll baseline, we'll just basically set the time for everything. And so when things are happening throughout the evening, we usually we keep, notebooks with us. So it's like, okay, I thought I heard a voice at 9:26, then we can go back and check the audio. And we label everything pretty detailed, like with everything with the room, like condenser mic, baby's room, or dynamic mic, baby's room. If we have more than one microphone, that's condenser, like condenser mic A, condenser mic B, that sort of thing. So yeah, we'll call it out like, okay, make a note, 9:26, we heard hello coming from the baby's room. So it's like, okay, well, let's go take a look and see what was happening at that moment. And then, we'll have EMF meters I always say when it comes to equipment like EMF meters, REM pods, anything that's motion activated, we're measuring the changes in the environment. We're not capturing a ghost. Then that's something we'll tell the client as well, because they probably more than likely have seen the equipment on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that it's presented to them on TV is, oh, we're using this to capture like evidence of a ghost. And we say, no, we use this to track changes in the environment. Same thing with temperature. So we have temperature guns that, we'll point to see,
cold
if
spots.
changes in temperature, cold spots, hot spots.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll use the occasional like REM pod where, it is motion activated. If you get close to it, it'll start to blink and go off.
I like REM pods. REM pods are interesting.
They are. Yeah, I know a lot of like skeptics really talk down to them with false positives and stuff. But I'm like, but it's still tracking something, whether or not we agree it's something like a spirit, they're still tracking something. Like if there's a change happening in the environment, we need to see what that change is. Now when it comes to like the spirit boxes and, ITC based communication, we tend to, if we do use it, we will be very honest with the client of like, none of this is proof that ghosts exist. We're just trying this out to see what comes through. And we've had a couple of interesting things. There was one in particular where the client's house that we were investigating, her ex had taken his own life. And her ex in life was a ghost hunter. And so we decided like, okay, so she was already familiar with that world. So I was like, you know what? I'm just curious. Let's get out of spirit box. I'm curious. And, we addressed this gentleman. I'll call him John, just for the sake of consistency. And, I was like, John, let's give this a try. You know what this is. You know what we're looking for. And oddly enough, we were getting a very prominent male voice coming through and having a conversation with this male voice. And it was very clear. It was a very coherent conversation. And we were keeping track of the radio sweeps, like, because we wanted to make sure that we weren't talking to like some random radio host on 95.6, and making sure that any responses we were getting through, it wasn't happening at a specific, on a specific station. So we were keeping an eye on that.
Do you have the cycle forwards or backwards?
So we have it go backwards. Forwards.
Because if it goes backwards, the chances of you having a legible word or an audible word is less.
Yep.
Because
and we do the same.
Moving forward, you're likely to capture a fraction of a word that's being said on the radio.
Exactly. Yeah. And even when we use the Ovulus, primarily the Ovulus 3, which we don't own ourselves, but when we do run into it, we're like, ooh. We'll use it in reverse.
That says words, right?
Yeah, but we use it in reverse phonetic mode. So, so we don't even use the word bank, because that can be programmed, and 9 times out of 10, the word demon's going to pop up at one point. That's just how it is. So we use it in reverse phonetic mode, which really reduces the chances of, it doesn't, not completely rule it out, but it reduces false positives. Because not only are you in phonetic mode, but you're moving backwards. So, so we'll try to set up expectations, just with like, hey, this is just ghost theory. We're not exactly sure what we're dealing with. And sometimes we'll even try to use, and of course the device's name is escaping me, but it's a device that tracks movement. So like if you were to set it on the floorboards, the lights will move when it senses vibrations from the floorboards. Oh my gosh, what is it called?
Seismograph or something? Or?
Yes, it's kind of like a seismograph.
Is it like is it from Ghost Stop? Like a little I think I might have one of those things.
It might be from Ghost Stop, or I had a really good tech guy a few years ago. Then he had kids and left because he had kids. But he built something. He actually built something out of scratch for us that tracks that. Gosh, it's beautiful. But how dare he have children and leave? nah, we're still friends. Anyway, yeah, so we'll use things like that too, just to, just to see what's going on there.
So you do all that. What do you capture? What evidence? You've ruled everything out. What are you left with?
Yeah, so depending on the context of the haunting, sometimes we walk away with, hey, we didn't capture anything, which it's not to say that there's not something happening. It's just we didn't capture it. We didn't, whatever was around, we didn't capture it. But then on those rare occasions, we do get something. But we can't just stop at like, oh, okay, we see a shadow, we see an apparition walking down the hallway. Okay, we're done. It's okay. Well, let's figure out why these experiences are happening. So we'll usually do a full history of the property as well. Depending on the context of how the client is living in the space, like, are they renting? Did they buy? We've been in touch with landlords who are very open and receptive, and they're like, oh yeah, my last tenant said this place was haunted. It's like, okay, well, there you go. There's a piece of the puzzle right there. But then sometimes we just hit brick walls of, nothing happened with the previous tenants. I don't know what's going on. So we'll try to, and we'll get a full, and during the interview process, we'll get a full makeup from the client as well. Like, what are their religious beliefs? Did they have anything traumatic recently happen? Did someone pass away? So usually what we'll do is we'll have like a meeting as a team to talk about, here's the experiences, here's the client's backstory, here's what we captured at the home. Let's talk theories, like what could this be? What could be happening? During one particular case, the client was encountering footsteps every morning at 3 a.m. and the cabinet doors would shake or even just open and shut by themselves. Well, when you tell me that's happening at 3 a.m. every morning, guess where I'm going to sit at 3 a.m. at your home? My butt's going to be in the kitchen, and the way that the house was laid out, you had the kitchen, but then to my right, I could see the hallway where the footsteps were happening that lead to the bedrooms. So I'm sitting on the floor because I wanted to see if with the footsteps, like, could I feel the footsteps? And sure enough, 3 a.m. rolls around. I feel like the footsteps, and I saw the cabinet shake, and I was like, oh, no way. And we got it on video, and I'm like, okay, this is okay. We're not going to say it's a ghost, but something is definitely happening. The client is telling the truth. Like, something's definitely happening. So the next night we're there, we have somebody outside at that time, because we wanted, like, is there a truck coming by? Is there a train? Like, we wanted to make sure, like, is there a plane, like, flying overhead? Like, we want to make sure that, like, is something shaking the house? We had other people stationed throughout the house of like, hey, do you feel it? Nope. Okay. Sure enough, 3 a.m. happens. The footsteps, cabinets moving again. And I'm like, okay, before we default to it's a ghost, we need to get a full picture here. And luckily this homeowner bought the house from a friend, and so we actually ended up talking to the previous owner. And I said, what was your relationship with the house? Did you live here? And she's like, well, actually I grew up here. This was my mom's house. We put the house on the market after my mom died, but this was the house where I grew up in, my parents lived in. Yeah. And, and since the current owner was friends with the previous owner, I said, have you heard about what's been happening? And she's like, yeah, I've heard about that. And I said, have you ever experienced this before? And she's like, no. She's like, nothing like that. And I said, well, the pattern that we're experiencing is every morning at 3 a.m. we hear footsteps, and then the cabinet doors open and shut.
So
mom
never experienced that until you were there?
Well, so she's like, oh, that's interesting that you say that. And she's like, I've been thinking about it since the current owner said that. And I said, well, why is that interesting? And she said, so when my mom was alive, she was diabetic. And around 2:45, 3 a.m., her blood sugar would start dropping. And so she would go to the kitchen to make herself a bowl of cereal. And that was her routine for about 40 years. She would go to the kitchen, make herself a bowl of cereal, stabilize her blood sugar, and then she would go back to bed. And I was
did she pass in that house?
She did pass away in the house. But when we brought it, so I was like, okay, bring in a psychic medium, because I'm like, okay, if mom is still here, let's see if. Although the side of me was like, man, is my afterlife just going to be me like regulating my blood sugar every morning at 3 a.m.? But so we brought in a psychic medium. Psychic medium doesn't pick up anything that's conscious. She's like, there's a lot of residual things happening here, but I don't see any. I don't pick up anything that's conscious. That's, that's intelligent, that I can talk to. She's like, I have a lot of memories here, a lot of positive things. So our theory, so after we put all this stuff together, our theory was that maybe this was more residual, like it was a residual haunting, meaning it was just because mom for about 40 years was walking down the hallway, opening up the cabinet doors to get out her cereal and opening the fridge to get some milk, that this routine was imprinted into the house. So
when you were sitting there in silence, waiting for it to happen, what were you thinking about?
Waiting for it to happen. The first time I was like, I'm like, oh, if this actually happens, this is going to be freaking amazing. I'm like,
so I mean, what I hear is that this activity never happened until you showed up and you were there, and then it happened. So
well, the activity was happening before we came
that particular activity, though, the one that no one else had heard about, right?
Yeah, so it was before we had. That's the reason why the client called us in.
So what did they hear that was different than what you experienced in that moment then?
So
if you remember.
I didn't necessarily encounter anything different than what the clients had reported. So we were called in to investigate that specific
spot.
Incident.
Okay, sorry, I must have missed something there. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's okay. We were called in to investigate that particular incident. And because other than that, nothing else was happening in the home, haunting wise. Nothing else was going on.
It's interesting though, because like you get a report, you do your due diligence, you come in, you check, you go to the spot, because that's the lead. You're following the lead. Something happened. So whether it's paranormal, whether it's you or your team or something else, all these other possibilities that could exist at the same time, because there's not enough ways to be able to capture it definitively. It still happened in that spot. So I don't know. How does that happen? Why does that happen?
Yeah. So there's a whole theory of, depending on who you talk to, there's a lot of folks who believe in the stone tape theory. And that's the theory that our external environment can absorb certain types of energies. So in a place like Gettysburg, where a lot of trauma happened from the 3 days of battle, 50,000 casualties throughout that, that the grounds absorbed that and replay it like a tape recorder. Now, if you talk to a geologist, they're going to tell you that's BS, but that's a theory. I tend to believe that I do think that energies can stick around. I don't know if you've ever walked into a home like while a couple is going through a divorce. Even if you didn't know at the time, but you can just sense the tension.
You can feel it.
Yeah, you can feel it. So I don't know about so much of like absorbing, but could energy stick around? I do believe in that. I do believe in that.
And that's kind of where I'm at too, because like it's what we can measure and what we do know. So we do know that we are energy beings, and if we pass, the energy has to go somewhere. So if she passed in the house, that energy left her in that house. It had to go somewhere. Whether or not that energy is there, whether or not the energy is intelligent, that's what we're trying to figure out with this paranormal investigation, is whether or not it's non-human intelligence, like it's or past human intelligence, I guess, in the paranormal world. Non-human is in the ET world or UFO world, but same thing. So have you been able to be in any experiences where you were able to suggest or theorize that the energy was intelligent?
Oh yeah, we have. That's so the same scenario with the ghost, with the ghost hunter that took his own life. He was intelligent. Not just that we concluded that through the spirit box, but the client's children was also, they could see him, they could hear him. So it was just the kids. So the story with that was the client and the entity, when he was alive, they had a daughter, but he took his own life while she was pregnant with their daughter. And what really prompted her to call us was that when her daughter reached about a year and a half old. Yeah, she was a year and a half old. She was starting to point and scream at something in the corner. And when her mom would ask, like, "Oh, what do you see?" she would pull her face down and move her eyes up. And, she kept going like, that. So she called us, like, wondering if, there was a ghost in her house or a demon that was terrorizing her kids. Or at least specifically the daughter. Like, the activity was targeting around the daughter. And when we were doing the interview and trying to get a full picture of what was going on, she told us about her partner who had taken his own life. And so we were kind of exploring, like, it's sometimes doing this is kind of like throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks. Because when I walked into the house, I didn't necessarily feel anything like negative. And I really go off of my intuition with situations like this, especially if someone calls demon. I'm like, there is a mood with negative entities. I don't feel that here. So let's see what's going on. And then when she told us that the partner was a ghost hunter, I was like, let's just try something. Let's just try it. Yeah, let's try something. Let's see what's going on here. And I would say, "Hey, John, you know the routine, what we're looking for. Just wanted to see if you're here." And, we had that whole conversation with him on the spirit box. And so I'm like, okay, we were getting fragmented responses, but we were able to piece together that, he is around. He misses his partner and he wants to be a part of his daughter's life, like, in some capacity. So I'm like, okay, next step, let's bring in a medium. So I have like a bank of mediums that I kind of keep to the side of people I trust, because the mediumship community can be very predatory. So I've vetted mediums just to, and they do this out of their own time too. They don't get paid. Depending how far they travel, will cover their gas. So I called in this one particular medium, and she came in. She didn't know anything about the house. I had our client take the kids out. And my medium is she's very good. So it's not like she's going to walk into a kid's room and be like, "I'm sensing child energy." She's a little bit more specific than that. And she walks in and she does a little walk around, and then she goes right to the youngest daughter's room, and she just starts like going, okay. She just starts like talking. She's like, "Okay, very matter of fact, there is a man here. I don't know. I think it might be this child's father. He's concerned that as she grows up, he's going to be forgotten." Like, just very matter of fact. And I'm sitting here like, and at this time, our client had a new husband. So it was very much like there was nothing in the space that would indicate that the baby was not the husband's kid, like nothing like that. So I'm like, okay, I'm I'm in. I buy that. I completely buy that. And then we would do a follow-up. So then we did a follow-up ghost box session, since that's spirit box session, since that's how we got the initial information. We're like, okay, let's follow up with this. And usually in this case, we try to ask yes or no questions, and basically confirming what the psychic medium said. Like, are you worried that you're going to be forgotten? Yes. And that was pretty remarkable. And so we talked to the client, and during the spirit box session too, we did tell the intelligent entity, we said, hey, just FYI though, the way that you're appearing to your daughter is terrifying her. I don't know how you're appearing to her, but it's scaring her. Find a way to stop it, because we're not sure if he was like appearing to her, how he passed, or because even my psychic medium, she was more of a feeler, and she could hear it, but she couldn't see it. So,
and we don't know how much support they have on the other side, or if they're even aware that they're doing it, or how that even works. Like there's many questions to ask if you can just communicate with them in real time, of course.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and the client decided to make a scrapbook of the baby's dad. Really fun, positive, photos and all of this stuff. Just to make sure that as their daughter grows up, she's going to know who her biological father is. And the activity result actually ended up going down quite a bit, at least having it not be so negative. And for me, that made sense, because he took his own life. He had regrets from taking his own life, because he was going to miss out on his daughter. And he wanted to make sure that his legacy and his memory stayed alive, and that he wasn't forgotten. So, and once we figure out like that was the problem to solve, then the client was actually very open. Well, at this point, the client was open to anything. She's like, just tell me what's going on. She was like, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. So yeah, it was that's one of the sadder cases we took, but
you're also providing a sense of closure too. You're changing the thought process of everybody that's involved too, helping them. The whole. And it's tough when we do these investigations. They want these answers, but we can't really give them answers, just opinions. And when you want to give their opinions, you want to make sure you have enough information so that way you give a proper opinion, so you're not liable or not hold accountable for the way that people respond to these opinions, because it's not fact in many cases. But if you give them that proper bedside manner, just by being there, just by coming to that aid and saying, you know what, just think differently, or we'll smudge the house at the end. Like even something as simple as that is cleansing, to change the atmosphere, to change that mindset, so they can just have that token to go back to and be like, well, yeah, these people came in the home and they cleared it, so it's okay, it's safe now. Even might not have changed anything other than the way that they felt about it, and that's needed as well. So this is, so thank you and your team for the service that you do in community and everywhere else that you travel, and that's needed. It's like in the Experiencer Support Association, the whole idea is to support the experiencer in any way without even knowing. We can't get the answers, not yet, but we're trying. But you have that bedside manner, you have that approach, and I just want to say thanks. Good job. That's great.
Thank you.
Well, so we got a few minutes left before we end. There's a segment I normally do at the end of the show, but I'm just going to change the vibe. We're nowhere near that rabbit hole, so I'm going to skip that segment. We'll just keep going. When you're done so how do people find you to submit a petition or a form if they want your assistance? So what website would that be?
Yeah, so they would go to associationofparanormalstudy.com.
Okay, so it is this one here. Okay.
Yep. And there should be a link there of that says something to the effect of like, have us investigate. I update the website, but I don't look at it that often.
Yeah, I just want to just kind of take the time to help others find you if they in your area or they need you.
Yep.
So there's investigations. Would that work? Or...
Yeah. Yep. Residential cases. So investigations, those are our public facing. But if you click on case submissions at the top, then yep. Yeah, I gotta love those ads. That's how we can make our revenue.
That's how we pay the bills. That's
how we pay the bills.
All right. So there's your form right there. Okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna put that link in the description there. So if anybody wants to help you guys out. And go from there. So you're done cases. You got this smoking piece of evidence. What do you do with it?
So we do give it to the client. Then we do tell the client to like, hey, just FYI, I do believe if you kind of obsess over something a little too much, you could attract things to come back. So I just tell the client, like, word of caution, I wouldn't be playing this on loop for like 20 hours a day, just obsessing over it. Because we've had clients inadvertently restart their haunting a bit, especially after we clear the energy of the space, and then they do everything we tell them not to do, which has happened, and it's very frustrating. So we give the client the evidence. We do tell them, though, if they do decide to, because it happens if they want to pursue a TV show, that you call us, because we do claim ownership, co-ownership of the data, because people steal each other's work all the time. So it's one of those, and it's part of the liability paperwork too. It's like, hey, any data that's collected, it's owned 50-50 by us. So we own half of it. So if we tell them, if you're going to pursue a TV show, give us a heads up. Not that we want in on the TV opportunity, but we do want to make sure that our reputation and our image is protected. And then we just keep it in the bank. If we get the client's permission, we may post it if they want us to, but we don't solicit that. We don't say, hey, can we have this to post on our website? It's more of like, oh, okay, we're going to keep this in our archives, and just in case how we have our database set up now. We have it in Google Drive, but we also have like a spreadsheet that we keep, where we will use we'll tag our cases with like poltergeist or residual energy or blah, blah, blah. So that way, if we run into a similar case, like down the line, we can actually search for those tags and those theories. So we can see other cases that we've worked on where we may have had a similar situation. So, yeah.
So I'm going to do a little shameless kind of plug here, because this will kind of help you guys out here too. So on our website, if you click submit a report, and after you hit yes, there's 3 questions here. If you're an experiencer, you can make a report to us here. But if you're an investigator, meaning you already have work that's already done, the best stuff that you have, if you click the middle one, fill out that questionnaire. As the investigator, you can speak on behalf of the experiencer while holding the evidence. You still have the rights of it to submit to us for review as well, to just kind of like a double look. And if it meets our criteria, then what we do, with permission, of course, with all parties involved, so the investigation group and your experiencer. So we don't talk to the experiencer unless we need to, but we'll ask you the questions and you get us the answer. So we'll work together so you have complete control. And then we'll add it to our visual evidence database, which puts it on the map. And what we do is exactly what you don't do, but it's when we get the consent. So we put all the images on here, and they're all tagged as well. So that way, when we go to our evidence and go to event categories. So we don't have anything for paranormal activity yet, but like say beings observed, which is the category we use. Anyone that's reported a being observed, they're all here. So we get to see the patterns in the visual evidence database. So the way this is set up right now is for my work, but what the hope is to get investigating teams like yours that share that same philosophy, that has evidence to kind of go through a second check or a double check to get it to that point where we can put it on the map. That gives you in your area, extra set of advertisement too, and all that other areas and things like that. But it's how you build that database to show and compare quickly visually. Okay, so you can look at data, you can search data all you want, but if you want fast facts, we put all the stuff there too, as well as audio. So that's just, so there's a resource available to you and anybody else. And that allows you, again, to hold on to the property and then talk to me and another investigator, however that works, to, make sure that you didn't miss anything, kind of like how I talked to you tonight, and then put it out there and, see if somebody else has seen it. Because that's how it works with us, is we're hoping by putting it out there that other people see it. I saw that too, and then you get the next report, and then you get more information, right? Our reporting system's a little bit different, but with this, it's called Project Babel. So, and based on the whole idea that the Tower of Babel, once it was collapsed and we were separated, right? The whole idea is reverse, is to bring everybody back together and regulate all the data, because there's lots of investigators out there that are doing the same thing. And if we can compile our data and resources together from different places of the world, I'm in Canada, you're in America, but we're experiencing the same thing. The people are the same, right?
Yeah.
So that's just a resource that I want to kind of put out there. I was kind of framing towards that. And your website you have your own website though, don't you?
Yes. Yep. alexmatsuo.com.
So let's throw that one up before we enter alexmatsuo.com. And what can people find there?
Let's see. Yeah. So there, so the spooky stuff, alexmatsuo.com, that's my own personal brand. Association of Paranormal Study is we're a bit rigid, and I don't want to say uptight, but we have an image that we want to, pursue as like serious investigators and whatnot. So I created spooky stuff as an area for me to be a bit more informal. I can be a bit more candid. I can say what's on my mind without worrying about tarnishing my team's reputation. So I can be a little more blunt when I review evidence or I talk about stories. And plus, I'm an author and I have a lot of books out. And so it's a place for me to talk about my books and promote what I'm working on. So it's definitely, I picture it more as like, hey, put your feet up and let's talk about spooky stuff. Whereas Association of Paranormal Studies, a bit more serious research and a bit more formal, if that makes sense. So
it makes total sense. So like on this podcast, for me, on behalf of the association, I'm usually off the cuff doing a whole bunch of silly things here and there, but then I'm also doing the work, a little bit more aggressive though. I'm an aggressive investigator, but I'm in ufology though. A lot of angry people in ufology. So, okay, well, this is great. I love talking paranormal. I love talking investigations. It's been a while since I've been in the field doing an investigation, so this kind of brought me back, brought me back a bit, and I miss it. I do miss the paranormal. Paranormal is like the funner things to investigate because it's that mysticism, it's that spirit, it's that possibility of woo and things like that. When you're investigating ufology, it's like, yeah, that guy's a liar, that person's a liar, that person, lots of money, like it gets aggressive, right? So have you ever encountered any, have you ever seen a UFO?
Not that I'm aware of. Apparently my grandfather did, which, he was an aeronautical engineer. So, very smart guy, also stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the 50s.
Do you think it might be connected? What about like an orb, a paranormal orb? Could that be a UFO?
I tend to look at orbs as more as dust, dust, moisture, bugs, lens flares. Yeah, I tend to stay away from the UFO area just because for me, I don't know. I feel like if you stare into the void long enough, it's going to look at you. It's going to stare at you right back. And considering my family's history with ghosts and lore and stuff, I'm like, well, okay, my grandpa definitely saw something, and I didn't even know this until a few years ago when a historian reached out to me from Fort Snelling, which was where my grandfather was stationed during World War II. He was very sought after in special ops, and but then they put him on a base where he was basically training soldiers in like how to, and speaking Japanese and all that stuff. So I feel like they pigeonholed him a little bit, but also the time period. I think they could keep a better eye on him. But she basically, I thought she was just going to send me documents about his time at Fort Snelling, which I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to know more information about my grandfather. But she sent a whole thing about his life that I was like, a lot of it I knew already because I did my own genealogy research, but she found this random book that mentioned a John Matsuo in the book who saw a UFO at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Wow.
And I'm like, and it would include like a sketch of what he saw. Yeah, I'll send it to you. It's actually really fascinating. And I was like, I never knew this, but my mom did tell me that my grandpa always carried a camera with him in case he ever saw like a UFO or an alien or anything like that. And I'm like, well, where did that? And at the time I was like, well, where did that come from? And then as I started looking into more like UFO research and stuff, I'm like, oh, Wright-Patterson. Okay. And I've noticed a lot of, when I talk to people who are into the UFO community, as soon as I say he was stationed at Wright-Patterson, they were like, oh, okay. So it's interesting.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we made it. Is there anything else you want to share with anybody? You have another book coming out. Let's spend a couple minutes talking about that. You have another book coming. That's something we wanted to talk about. Yeah.
I got a new book coming out next month. It's called The Hamptonville Hauntings. This is basically it's a case study on this haunted location in North Carolina, in the middle of the state. It's a location known as the Trivett Clinic. And I've been investigating the Trivett Clinic since 2018. And so I've investigated there several times. So in the book, I go into my investigations, the historical research that I did, and I also interview other investigators who have been to the Trivett Clinic to get their perspective on what's going on. So it's definitely it's a fascinating location. I love it. It's very accessible to investigators in North Carolina. But I'm noticing as the Trivett Clinic becomes more well-known, the more the origin story of the Trivett Clinic is starting to get a little bit skewed. So I wrote the book to kind of just set a baseline of like, hey, here's the history. Here's what we know for sure, thanks to newspaper clippings. Here's what's based on gossip and hearsay, small North Carolina town. Because I noticed a lot of the stories were starting to get a bit extreme. Like what used to be like, oh, there was a supper club at the Trivett Clinic. Someone told me, oh yeah, there was a brothel at the Trivett Clinic. And I'm like, oh no, there wasn't. So let's go ahead and just set the standard, set the baseline right now. So, and plus, it's a fascinating place and it's definitely it was worth writing a book about. And what I thought was going to be about 50,000 words has turned into like 65,000 words. So there's a lot to say about the place.
Good. And so it's coming out in September then, right?
Yep.
And then where can they find it when it's ready?
Yeah, so people can pre-order the Kindle version now on Amazon.
Okay.
So you can pre-order the Kindle version. Yeah, I do have a mailing list for the Hamptonville Hauntings. So if you go to my website, you'll see a page up at the top that says the Hamptonville Hauntings. If you click on that, you can sign up for a mailing list and you'll get exclusive updates on the book. So whether it's like the interviews that I did or just little fun tidbits, sharing, I'm sharing photos from previous investigations there, videos, just to kind of give people a backstage look at the book as I'm preparing to launch it. So just keeping people engaged, little marketing tactic.
Cool. Well, smart. It works.
Yeah.
Smart marketing, as I say. It's good. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Cece, are we doing an after chat? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Yep, thumbs up. Okay. So for those of you who are still in the chat, we're going to do an after chat. We'll see you. If you want to hang out in the YouTube comment section, Alex, you're more than welcome to participate.
Sure.
Other than that, thank you so much for being here and hope to see you and hear from you again. And good luck on all your future investigations. And again, thank you for your service to the experiencers out there.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah. No. Thank you, CC, for finding you. And we'll see everybody soon. So thanks for watching, everybody. Keep your eyes in the sky and heed the world.
That's it, everybody. That is a wrap. That is the end of it all. Thank you for joining me tonight. I look forward to seeing you back next week, where we'll continue to have this conversation deep down into the rabbit hole in which we call the Ultra Spectrum. Thanks for joining us. I said that already. Oh well, fuck it. Eat the world.
Hi.
Hello.
That was great.
That was so good. I was not wanting that conversation to end at all. I almost wanted you and Alex to continue on and leave the after chat out of this episode.
Oh, I guess well we could have. I didn't. Well,
But it's all
you know,
good. I
just
appreciate
people
her
waiting for
very
the
much.
after chat. We just didn't know. I went over time. I skipped our flat Earth question. Come on.
Yeah, no.
You know, I didn't want to kill the vibe. But you know what's funny too is like I appreciate this. I'm always reminded of how messed up I am when I bring in UFO thinking it's going to be this thing, but the reaction I always get is like what the fuck are we talking about UFOs for? Because, and then it's like, but it's so pure and genuinely and innocent because like when I was a paranormal guy before I got dragged in this UFO shit, and then like, you know, I sometimes I just wish I was not tainted by ufology, you know.
Well, maybe you got to tap into your roots.
But then,
you know?
yeah, go back to my roots. But her, like, the reaction is perfect. It's like just things in the sky, whatever. Like, you know, this is where it's really going, which is true though, because it's consciousness. It's you know, and it's just a machine thing. So, anyways, I enjoy it.
Yeah, like you said in the interview, you know, you can actually gather some evidence and have, you know, an experience yourself in investigating the paranormal. Whereas, you know, often with the UFO investigations, you're after the fact, you know, you're kind of more assessing its credibility and, you know, what it may or may not be.
Now, with the hybrid philosophy, once we get enough data showing how it's all connected, there is part of my research plan is to go to said places where there are hotspots of UFOs and use paranormal, you know, equipment or tactics to try to make contact. So, you know, maybe we use a Ouija board if Priscilla will allow it to do a CE5 maybe. To prove that whole it's just a medium, it's consciousness and connection. Right.
Yeah, well, I've even been debating myself with my own experiences of paranormal connection because I just found out recently because my partner is very heavily tied into like searching the history of the local region for his own projects. That there was a massacre that occurred literally right on my lake. And yeah, so
like Crystal Lake, Camp Crystal Lake.
I don't know that story. I don't know what that is, but
Jason Friday the 13th.
yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was a real thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, it's paranormal, not ufology. I forgot. Not a real thing.
Yeah, I don't know the ins and outs of it yet, but it's piqued my interest. So
see, this is where I was kind of going with that too, and I didn't want to kind of like get too far into the whole. I don't want to turn from an interview to an interrogation, but I like to challenge the thought enough to get an understanding of the belief and where they're all coming from too, but not go too far into it. But I do have this feeling that the people that are doing the investigation, like, they have these abilities, they have the talent to tap into it. So creating the environment relies heavily on the experiencer being there and the people who are able to tap into the ultra spectrum. So it's kind of a false positive or a counterintuitive when you try to investigate a place when you have the people in it. And in order to do a proper investigation without tampering the evidence, the best way to do it is to not have anyone or anything in it. Mm-hmm. So just like you sitting, like she said, sitting in the room to get familiar with the space, that is a good tactic because you can listen, you can hear, you can feel, everyone can relax, you can meditate a little bit, just get in the zone and balance your thoughts to negate the possibility of that hive consciousness interfering with the energies, get on that safe wavelength. But it would be even better if you just set the cameras up and you left the house, because then you can rule out that nothing or no one is interfering. But you can't hear anything if you're not in the house.
There would be a lot of senses that you'd be lacking, right?
So it's challenging. You almost have to do it alone. When you add more people make noises. You know, you hear coughs and farts and shit from like later on, like they're down the hall, but you don't realize it, that you don't think anyone heard you until you go back and you listen to the audio file and you're like, what the hell is that? And you spend countless hours. I've done this. This is a real thing. Countless hours. Only to find out that somebody passed gas upstairs and they didn't want to say anything. Because it's just a simple little thing. But no, that's great. And I mean, she's knowledgeable. The process is phenomenal. Research is there. Bedside manner is there.
Yeah, I love her approach very much. I'm a big fan. Yeah.
So, cool.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you had a good interview.
I always enjoy it. I always enjoy these conversations. I never know where it's going to go. And no, it's good. So when is EA? Because I was obviously wrong.
Yeah, so you seem to have forgotten that we've switched it to a weekday. So it's now on Wednesday.
I haven't forgotten. I just didn't know when that started. So that's starting now.
Yes, so we are hosting Experiencers Anonymous on August 31st at 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, so it's right about 31st. I'm just wrong about it being a Saturday.
Yes, and we've also scheduled the one for September already as well. So that'll be September 28th, I believe. Same time.
And you'll be sending out a fancy, shabby looking newsletter on the 31st as well, which is dope as shit. That is a nice looking newsletter, so good job.
Thank you.
So it's on there, so I like that. And then, so tell us a little bit about the newsletter. What are we doing with that now?
Yeah, so I will be sending that out at the end of each month. I'm actually thinking of sending it on the 30th so that people get the announcement for EA in case they, have no other means of finding us.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and that way, so maybe just like the day before the last day of the month sort of thing, but close-ish to the end of the month, depending on what's going on. And it'll be an update of, the month that just occurred, everything we've done, and a little bit of a teaser for the month ahead.
and it looks good. It's a good recap. I like it. And it's a good review. For me, looking at that, the template was like, oh man, so much has happened in like 30 days. So it's like, it kind of makes me appreciate a little bit more of like what we have done. In this backdrop that we're using, this is new. You gave it the new website, nice bright colors, everyone can see. So good job on that. You're really kicking ass on this graphic design stuff. So good job.
Thanks. Yeah, and so next week on Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, September 1st, we're going to have guest Mark Sargent to talk to you about Flat Earth, because you've been asking that for a while.
Yeah.
So,
it's going to be a good show. It's probably going to be like 6 hours. Put on your Wheaties. I'm staying up all night asking
part
that,
2,
man.
get them back.
We're
You'll
gonna
like
have to
break
come
your
back.
rule.
Like, I don't know. Yeah, we're going to have to come back and answer questions. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. So for those of you who don't know who Mark Sargent is, if you guys have watched, he's on, what's that program on Netflix?
He had a documentary on Netflix called something The Curve, Beyond the Curve, maybe.
Yeah, Beyond the Curve sounds right.
Something like
Or no, that's a COVID thing, isn't it? No.
I'm not sure, but that would make sense.
That would make sense.
I forget the title of it. I watched it, though.
Yeah, I know. I watched it, too. Oops. Yeah, Behind the Curve. Okay.
Behind the Curve. Okay.
Yeah. So that was good. See? Already watched. So, I mean, if we're going to have a conversation about Flat Earth, this guy has obviously spent enough time, and he's got his own YouTube channel. He hasn't been banned on YouTube. He's able to talk about it. All these things that we're always worried about getting shut down about, but always curious about it. I'm really excited. I don't know. I'm like, it's just what I'm afraid of is like by the end of it, everybody, I'm going to be like, yeah, once you go flat, you don't go back, So I'm going to be like, all right, this is it.
Try and keep your investigator hat on,
I'm fully committed. This is it.
Who knows? It might do the opposite to you. You might.
I've seen the documentary, and I've seen the arguments behind the documentary, and I can understand the arguments back and forth. That it's still theory, but we'll save that for if that ever comes up to. I mean, elevation is different in different places. Blah blah blah. We're gonna get into that, but anyways, it's gonna be the episode that I'm excited for. It's gonna be a huge one, at least for me. I'm gonna fucking love every minute of that.
This is a gift from me to you. Mark
so
Sargent's coming.
So good job. That may be our last show ever. Who knows? We'll get shut down after that. We don't know.
Well, I'm gonna definitely step out of Flat Earth chats. I'm not going back for a while, so I have to take a breather after this episode coming up.
Why? Is it stressful for you?
It really irritates me to a degree that it triggers me beyond words. But
the people or the theory?
I think it's just more the people. It's not the theory. I can understand the theory, and I don't necessarily have a point on it. Like, it could be true. I don't really care, but it's just like taking the facts they throw out often are like, how could this be? And it's like, well, like, science explains it. But if you don't believe in science, then you're not going to believe that, I guess, I can't explain to you how a bee flies or how it can fly if you don't believe in science,
But they use science too. They're both using the scientific method.
It depends who you're talking to. But some people just...
And they come to a different conclusion using the same equation sometimes. So that's where
it just feels like circular logic to me a lot of times, and that is irritating to me beyond words.
Circular. I don't know.
Not global.
Yeah, not global. Just
not spherical.
No, circular. Man, I found an interesting map. I think I just mailed it to myself.
It's a fascinating theory. I find it really interesting. Like for me, the biggest aspect of that theory that fascinates me is the concept of land beyond the supposed wall or beyond, our perception. And somehow I feel like Brownbeard just joined in.
Hello, Brownbeard. Oh, we forgot to say hello to everybody.
Yeah, we did. We got just sucked up in the convo, but thanks for joining, Brownbeard. But yeah, it's just I can understand what people are saying and why they're saying it. I just think we're all, for lack of a better word, speaking about the same thing in instances, but just using different language, just using different terminology, and coming at it from different perspectives.
Right.
And that's what being human is all about. So I'm all about it.
Well, it's also super connected to the map for some fucking reason. So I need to understand enough about the flat Earth theory to be able to extract what I need to extract from that to apply to the map.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just know that the map has what led me to that rabbit hole.
Yeah, so maybe just show the map, because maybe a lot of people might think we're referencing flat Earth map right now.
Yeah, this map. Yeah. So I don't know. That's what led me down that fucking rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah. So we'll get all your flat Earth questions out there and see what Mark Sargent might have to say about it.
I don't know. I don't have questions other than like, how do you know?
You don't.
Yeah.
I think we should all invest in like a weather balloon and put a GoPro on it, or like a really high quality camera, see how high it goes, and see if we could like through the atmosphere and see if we could observe the curve.
People have done that, but they never face the camera up. They always face it down for some silly reason.
Okay.
Wait, there's lots of things out there. But anyways, let's say hello to our people. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Paradox Fossils. What'd you say? They appear to me like a very fast projection requiring no surface, but they do use walls like a screen. Are we talking about ghosts?
Yes. He was referencing ghosts, yeah.
Lisa says telekinesis is like that. It only works when you don't expect it to, but when you want it to.
Not when you want it to. Yeah.
Not when you want it to, yes. Shelly Michelle Morrison, hello. GTSY, is that good to see you?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I inferred from that. I'm not really good with those acronyms, you know that.
So she says, this one will start here. I have PTSD, but in my view, it doesn't affect my memories of my ufology encounters. Does PTSD invalidate my memories? I never thought so. Okay. Well, a lot of people have PTSD. I have PTSD. There's, it's traumatic and things like that. Does it affect your memories? It can. If it's untreated. So there's many therapeutic exercises that can be done actually on our website. Actually, we'll go back to the website. We do have a couple resources. So experiencers, go to experiencers resources. And then these wise mind and mindfulness sheets in this workshop that I've added to as well. Those are a couple exercises in there to help with just any mental illness in general.
Regulating your emotional state.
Yeah, so it may affect your memory, but it's temporary, right? And then the memories will come back. So does it invalidate my memories? Like I don't think so. There depends on. I don't know your case. I don't have it in front of me, and I'm just speaking in general terms because it's a lot of people have that experience that. So we'd have to really look at the specifics, but I don't think having any generalized mental health, I don't want to say condition, but situation. I don't think that really matters to the point, depending on what you're looking for. So it depends on the investigator, depends on what they're measuring. From our perspective, it's important to know, to understand, so that way we can identify certain markers that may be involved with a traumatic event that was caused by it, but we don't know if there's past traumatic events or present. So we need to separate all that. So it's good to know so we can work on everything, or perhaps refer to specialists to deal with certain things that aren't associated with the experiences. We kind of have to break that apart. But without doing that, there are still exercises and understanding and things that we can do to support so you just feel better in general, and without applying those labels. So no, I don't think having any mental illness invalidates any memory or any experience. And that's the same thing. Like, it doesn't matter to a point that you may have had alcohol or you were under the influence of marijuana while you had your experience. That's just a scapegoat for debunkers to use and try to say the person is incredible. Some people could have, a drink all day long and you wouldn't even be able to tell. So there's different levels of intoxication, there's different levels of things like that. And so I find that a lot of people do judge too much, and they infer a lot of things, and they assume, and it may be a fact, but it also may not be the cause for it. So don't worry about that. Not here anyways. Lisa says REM pods are one of my favorites. Yes, I like REM pods. Do you know what a REM pod is?
I have no idea what a REM pod is, but it sounds like I associate REM with dreams, but I know that's not what that is. So I was planning on looking that up for sure. Yeah. What does it do?
So it's a you're not interested at all, I can tell.
No, it's not that. It just isn't what I thought it would look like.
So it's a neat little tool. It's noisy, but it's got lights and it's got an antenna on it. It creates this EMF field, this barrier around it. So if anything comes close, so if you can touch the rod, it will sound off. You can get close to it, that breaks that EMF field, it sends an alarm. So it's neat because you can see it in the dark because it lights up and it's loud. So it can suggest that energy had transferred there, but it's not enough to determine what the energy was. You need to have other measuring devices.
So you should have like a camera on your EMF pod wherever you
and you should have a thermal camera. You should have all the tools in the room so you can see if they all go off. But it's a neat little tool, and if a human being walks past it, it'll get triggered. So like it's pretty interesting.
And you can set the radius to whatever you need to?
No, I don't think so. I don't think you can set the radius on that unless you tweak it and you're an engineer, and I wouldn't know how to do that. So I don't know. All right, Nantan Lupin says we're shadow banned again. I don't know how we're shadow banned when you still find us. So
I don't know what that means. So is he saying that he can't find us, or?
Yeah, I guess search. I don't know what he's searching.
He never responded back. I asked.
Well, the problem that we had before is he's just using the wrong keywords to find us, which I don't know what he's mentioned. He typed in Ryan Stacey or something UFO last time, and that's not. That's not what this is. That's not what's trending. So it's beyond the tinfoil hat. But I mean, we don't know. We need more specifics. So if you're going to pop in, and if you're even watching this on the replay, give us more details so we can sort that out and rule out whether or not we're shadow banned. But I don't think so.
No.
Shelley says, yes, Einstein, I think, said energy never dies, only changes form. And then you said energy is neither created or destroyed.
Yeah, so the quote was, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes. It can only be changed from one form to another. So I just was kind of like elaborating on that quote.
Brown Beard, you missed a good show. Go back, watch it on the replay.
You did, Brown Beard, but yeah, we were just introducing or talking about next guest when he arrived. So next week is on Beyond the Tinfoil Hat will be Mark Sagan talking about Flat Earth. Ryan just left. And then we have Alex Matsuo, who was our guest this evening, and she did a great job. And she said, "Thanks for watching, everyone. Nice to meet you all." Thank you for coming, Alex.
Yes, thank you for coming. I got kicked out there. I don't know what happened there, but I'm on the right side again. So hold on. It just bugs me. It's just weird. It's just where I'm
It
looking.
is weird. It's weird
so,
for me too.
Yeah, so thank you, Alex. Thank you. And that's it. That brings us to live. Cool.
So what are you doing for Uncharted Case Files next week? Or are you doing one?
I don't know. See, I'm having a hard time with that. I've rebooted it so many times. It's hard because I don't have a co-host. I don't have anyone to talk to. And it's a listening format, right? So I'm educating. So I'm trying to work through that the feeling that I'm getting that's different than this vibe. I enjoy this vibe because it's a conversation. It feels weird talking to myself. So I've been thinking about doing pre-recorded and then posting it. But then if I pre-record it, then I got to upload it, then I got to post it, then I got to kind of do it, and I might not do it. So like it's putting it in the habit. So I don't know what I'm doing, but you suggested talking about Tessa Most Wanted. So maybe we can start down at the lowest number, earlier cases, and maybe, I can just do case by case till we go through them, because there's 30 of them. And then if I don't know, then we'll do cases, and then until I work on some documents, because tomorrow's Friday, and I got to finish up our research on the membership idea. And then hopefully that's it for business stuff, and you're on that, and then I can get back into case mode.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Chris.
I did watch your episode. I watched it on the replay because I was driving when you were doing it. I thought you mentioned that you might want to do a Clan Lake Part 2.
Yeah, so I have to upload the rest of the documents. So so I should. So I'm going to try and get them done over.
You could do a teaser of the documents that you're going to upload.
Well, I have installed on this computer. So let's do Clan Lake Part 2.
You don't have to. Okay.
Yeah, because it's fresh in my mind, because I'm going through those documents, and I got to go through it and get it done, because Chris Stiles just sent me a whole bunch more on Shag Harbor, so I need to get Shag. So I gotta, I've been asking so many people to send me documents, and finally we get one. And like every day, here you go. And I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
So, I gotta get this going. So yeah, all right. I'll have to do some documents tomorrow. So I'll make a list, make a note. Remind me tomorrow.
Oh no, I'm not working tomorrow.
You're not working tomorrow? Are you off tomorrow?
Yeah, it's Friday.
I can change that. Give me 1 second. I'll schedule you in. Okay,
I'll start quitting on you if you keep that shit up.
You can't quit. You're fired. Okay, no, it's all good. All right, I'll figure it out. So you do it that way. Leave it on me, and I will do Clan Lake Part 2.
Okay.
And I'll upload some documents. And if I don't have them uploaded, then I'll pull them up and I'll read them off the cuff from my computer.
Okay.
And I'll be embarrassed that I did not fulfill my task. But it's almost weekend, so I kind of don't want to work,
Well, get in touch with me tomorrow. See if I can help you out.
It's okay. You're not working tomorrow. You already told me. I ain't talking to you. Not working. You're done. Don't want to hear from you till Monday.
Okay.
I think that's it though. EA's on Wednesday. Uncharted Case Files on Monday. Newsletter will go out on Tuesday.
Yes.
And then Thursday is Flat Earth with Mark Sargent.
Yeah, Mark Sargent.
And then Friday is Hide from the World Day, in case everything goes crazy from Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. Turn off everything.
Yeah, turn off everything. I don't want to hear it. Next thing you know, everybody on UFO Twitter doing little clips there.
Yeah.
You know what happened earlier too? So so this tinfoil hat actually has a tinfoil hat underneath it, and normally I take it out, but I didn't. It was stuck to the hat. I didn't realize that. And then when I took it off earlier, I was like, oh shit. So I removed the camera so I could pull it off real quick. Yeah, so I could pull this damn thing off because I noticed it too because it was sweating. But yeah, so it actually comes with a little fucking liner here.
That's funny. What is that supposed to be? Like an EMF?
This is the EMF thing. So without this, the tinfoil hat doesn't work. That's the protector.
Okay.
But I thought it stayed attached to the hat, but it obviously didn't because I was like, oh, better take that off.
I was like, oh, he's got a double tinfoil hat.
Yeah. Oh, the next, that'll be me on the internet there. Look at this guy.
He's an alien.
Anyways, all right, let's just end it. It's bedtime.
All right,
thank you. Good job this week. Yeah, that's good. All right, peace out. And I gotta make some outros for this. I'll never know what to play. Subscribe to YouTube. How about that? All right, peace out. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.